If you clicked on this video, I bet you know exactly the skirt I'm talking about. But if you are unfamiliar, it is my tremendous joy and honor to get to introduce you to this magical garment. I am so excited by just the possibility that I'm about to introduce somebody to Bella Swan's khaki skirt for the first time. This is why I do what I do. But whether or not you are familiar with the khaki skirt already, I hope that this video will provide some additional perspective onto one of Twilight Dumb's most beloved memes, because believe it or not, in this time of the Twilight Renaissance, we have new content that provides new context onto the incredible importance of this garment in the Twilight Saga. Our collective understanding of the khaki skirt is mired in meme and myth, so let's go back to the source material. This particular Bella look does not appear in the movies. This is purely a book occurrence, so let's go back to Twilight by Stephenie Meyer, published in 2005. Here's what goes down. Bella Swan, ordinary American teenager, is about to go on essentially her second real date with Edward Cullen, classmate and vampire. This is still one of the first occasions that they have spent any meaningful amount of time alone together, but the relationship is already incredibly serious. She is unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him, and as for him, she is his life now. They have known each other for 3 months and been on speaking terms for like a couple weeks, and they have so far had one date, which was to lie in a meadow. So let's set the scene. It is Saturday morning. We are at Bella's house. It's her dad's house. She's 17. Edward and Bella have spent the night together, non-sexually. No sex, no kissing even, just a lot of deep, long stares and face touching. If you haven't read the Twilight books, it's difficult to communicate how much of them by volume is face touching. Bella's dad has already left for the day, so they have the place to themselves, and Edward goes downstairs to give Bella privacy while she changes. Yes, they have spent the night together. He is leaving her room to let her change. This is the dynamic right now. When she's dressed, she shouts down the stairs to him, "I'm decent." When Edward sees her come down the stairs, he says, "Wrong again." He's always telling her she's wrong about things. "You are utterly indecent. No one should look so tempting. It's not fair." Bella then offers to change again into something else, and Edward says she is so absurd. Then Edward takes Bella to meet his vampire family. It is super weird and awkward, and the day ends with a thunderstorm baseball game, which kicks off the events of the book's finale. So, Edward clearly thinks Bella looks super hot when she comes down the stairs, right? Utterly indecent and so tempting. We have to note here that these books are in Bella's first-person point of view, so truly we can't know exactly what he means by this. It has been established that Edward is attracted to Bella in a sexual way, and also in a wanting to drink her blood way. And the two attractions are described with very similar language. Edward talks about these two desires in much the same way, and he treats them in exactly the same way, as something within him that is biologically hardwired and indescribably intense, that needs to be beat back with sheer force of iron will relentlessly every moment of every day, because a momentary lapse in resolve could mean the death of the girl he loves. The way that these two drives can be interchanged throughout the story is kind of the point of the book. So back on the stairs, Bella, who is trying to be considerate of Edward's bloodlust, is worried that he means tempting in the blood-sucking way, and so she offers to change so that it's not uncomfortable for him. But it becomes pretty clear in the scene that he means the sexy way. "Shall I explain how you are tempting me?" He kisses her, and they do the closest thing that the first Twilight book has to making out, which is when they kiss for a few seconds with closed mouths, and the moment that Edward tries to move into some French territory, Bella immediately passes out. A truly life-threatening level of horniness is at play here. So what on earth is clumsy, awkward, girl-next-door Bella Swan wearing that inspires this kind of response in her man? Luckily, we do get to see her get dressed, so let's skip back a page. "It was hard to decide what to wear. I doubted there were any etiquette books detailing how to dress when your vampire sweetheart takes you home to meet his vampire family. I ended up in my only skirt, long, khaki-colored, still casual. I put on the dark blue blouse he'd once complimented." This paragraph has a quality that is maybe Twilight's signature, which is that it totally sounds normal up until you think about it for even 1 second. When you read it in the context of the chapter, which is engrossing and fast-paced, your brain just kind of metabolizes it into the Twilight narrative world, and you say, okay, but the second you make the mental effort to assemble this outfit in your mind, it's insane. Let's break the outfit down, okay? First, the blouse. Bella says that Edward once complimented the blouse, which is true, I guess. We first see Bella put it on a little while back in chapter 7. Forks, Washington is legendarily cold and rainy and always cloudy, which is why the Sparkle and the Sun Cullens like to live there. On the rare occasions when the sun is out, Edward and his siblings skip school. This is one of those days. It is unusually sunny and warm for Forks, which Bella is really enjoying because she recently moved from Phoenix, Arizona, and really misses the weather there. I dressed for the warmer weather in a deep blue V-neck blouse, something I'd worn in the dead of winter in Phoenix. So what do we know? We know the top is deep blue. It is a V-neck. This is important. It is described as a blouse, which can mean a lot of things, honestly, and sometimes it just means shirt that is kind of nice. But if it's described as a blouse, I think we can rule out it being a sweater or a t-shirt or like a button-down. And we know that it is suitable for deep winter in Phoenix, so let's say it's a good top for the 50s. Definitely not a thick sweater, but probably does have long sleeves, especially if Bella isn't wearing a jacket, which I believe she doesn't have until she moves to Forks. She wears the top to school on that sunny day, and she's disappointed not to see Edward there because she doesn't know yet about his thing with the sun, and they've just started talking again after weeks of him giving her silent stares in biology class. And she's still wearing it that night when she goes out shopping with friends. This is that evening in Port Angeles where she ends up separating from her friends and walking alone down a dark alley for no other reason than the fact that she has the survival instincts of that baby muffin that begs for death.
You have room for a muffin?
No.
I want you to let me die!
And then some, local ruffians start hassling her and they're making moves like maybe they're going to attack her, and then bam! Silver Volvo. Out of the darkness, it's Edward, and he's pissed, and he gets her out of there. And they end up having a long dinner at a restaurant called La Bella Italia, where he answers some of her questions about his apparent supernatural qualities in exchange for Bella eating some mushroom ravioli and drinking a ton of Diet Coke. I guess you could count this as their first date because he is taking her out to dinner, but I consider it more of a pit stop during a rescue. As she slams Diet Cokes at La Bella Italia, Bella shivers. Edward is worried. He is being hypervigilant about her going into shock because she is just experienced what for most normal human beings would be a very traumatic encounter. But Bella insists she is just cold, but oh no, she doesn't have her jacket. She left it in her friend's car, so Edward takes off his jacket and gives it to her. Not that this even really helps because the jacket is ice cold from being on Edward. Bella spends a lot of this portion of the book trying to covertly sniff Edward, and so she takes this opportunity to get a good noseful of his scent from the jacket. I fear I am getting a little off track here, but this moment is important because in the exchange of the jacket, both characters seem to be noticing the other's clothing and by extension the other's body for the first time this evening. With his jacket off, Bella notes that Edward is wearing a very tight ivory turtleneck sweater. She doesn't say tight, she says snug, but I think if you can see somebody's muscles beneath a sweater, I would call that tight. In this moment, Bella realizes she's never noticed what Edward is wearing or looked at his body because why would she look anywhere else but his dazzling face? This is extremely adorable as an observation from a 17-year-old that theoretically has an enormous crush on this person, and it is also foreshadowing the fact that Bella will now be tracking Edward's sartorial choices, which are almost as batshit as hers. This man really wears everything, and there is a scene in the book where they accidentally wear matching outfits. It's just chaos. It also seems that watching Bella put on the jacket is drawing Edward's attention to her body for the first time in that evening as well. Again, it's hard to be 100% sure because this is Bella's first-person point of view, so not only do we not have access to Edward's internal thoughts and opinions, but all of his actions and expressions come to us filtered through Bella Vision. Bella Vision, that's really funny. Through Bella's telling, this is the first time in this scene that we have any indication that Edward is looking at her. Bella notes that Edward is watching her and she blushes, unsurprisingly. Blushing is one of Bella's signature moves, along with tripping over nothing and being negged. Specifically, what Edward says is, "That color blue looks lovely with your skin," which is kind of an intense compliment, to be honest, and makes no sense coming out of the mouth of a 17-year-old boy, but does fit Edward, considering he is number one, an old man, and number two, wants to literally bite into her skin. Neither of them references the other's clothes for the rest of the night. They're too busy talking about how old he is and how he's 17 and how long has he been 17. But we do see at the end of the night that Bella gives back Edward's jacket after one last whiff, even though he offers to let her keep it for the next morning, but she says that she doesn't want to have to explain it to her dad. And I've read this book. I know this dad. And hon, he is not going to notice you coming home in a new jacket. So that's the top. But the star of the show is the khaki skirt, or should I say the khaki colored skirt. That scene on the stairs is the skirt's first appearance in the series, and here's what we know. Long, khaki colored, still casual, and Bella's only skirt. We should be able to infer a fair amount from this description. I think describing a garment as khaki colored means that it is definitely not khaki material. Otherwise, you would just call it a khaki skirt, and calling it khaki colored would be insane behavior. Likewise, long doesn't mean any particular length, it's just a descriptor. So like a T-length skirt is a long skirt, but if the skirt were T-length or knee length or something like that, I would expect you to use those descriptors. So because you're not using them, I assume they don't fit. It doesn't make sense to just call a skirt long unless you're talking about significantly below the knee, and I would expect it to be near ankle length. It is possible that we have an asymmetrical hem situation. Twilight came out in 2005, so potentially Bella could have a handkerchief hem. The timeline checks out. That would account for the vagueness of the length description. But again, it would be so bizarre to have a garment with such a specific feature and just call it long. I think it only makes sense if this is an approximately ankle length skirt with a straight hem. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, with the caveat that saying it has to be this way, otherwise it's ridiculous, is not a logical rule that you can apply to the Twilight books, so grain of salt. This is what I would guess the skirt looks like. This is a very 90s look, but that makes sense for Bella's closet, that things would be 5 to 10 years out of date. And then for the top, I usually picture it like this, but it could just as easily be something a little more blousy that looks like this. As best we can guess, altogether, this is the look. So a couple things. One, this is a wild thing for a 17-year-old to pull out of her closet for a big important date. We have no indication of where these clothes came from, although we do know that Bella does not have a lot of money. But she never says, "Oh, I have to wear these stupid clothes my mom picked out," or "I'm so glad I found this skirt for 75 cents at Goodwill." There's no indication of whether she likes them or not. They're just her clothes. She doesn't really think about them, and they are deeply normal to her, which is why as the reader, it's very easy to think about them as normal until you stop to paint that mental picture. And when you do that, all of Bella's outfits are weird and sort of ugly sounding and very, very modest. Regardless of the weather, Bella is consistently very covered up. During that same rare sunny few days in Forks, Bella takes a blanket out and spreads it on the grass in her backyard to read in the sunshine. To better enjoy the warmth on her skin, she lays on her back and she tosses her hair out to fan out behind her, and she pushes her sleeves up as far as they could go. Bella, why are you wearing sleeves? She is in the privacy of her own backyard. Her dad isn't even there. I'm not expecting her to sunbathe in a bikini, but put on a tank top. She must have sleeveless tops. She's from Arizona. There is a very simple explanation as to why 17-year-old Bella Swan dresses like a middle-aged Mormon mom. And it's because she dresses like Stephenie Meyer, right? Who is actually a middle-aged Mormon mom. This is the same reason that whenever we see Bella at home going about her everyday activities, she's cooking dinner or doing laundry. Like, this is the dynamic between author and character. I could find exactly one instance of Stephenie Meyer commenting publicly on the khaki skirt in an interview for a fan podcast a couple years ago. And it seems to support the idea that Bella, because she has inherited Stephenie Meyer's fashion sense, she thinks of this as a wardrobe basic.
You would never forgive us if we didn't ask about the khaki skirt. It's something we love to talk about. It's brought us a lot of joy. So we were just wondering if it was inspired by a skirt you own, if Bella has some kind of special attachment to it. What does it look like?
I was talking about this because I didn't realize that this was a thing. Like, I didn't know that people cared about having a neutral tone skirt in your closet. I think the use of the word khaki sort of is something that ages me. Like, that was a thing when I was younger. I think most people my age still have a khaki skirt or something equivalent in their closet. And it's just one of those, it's just that like base item, like a black t-shirt. Mm-hmm. And Bella has such a limited wardrobe. I figured her only dress up thing would she have one skirt and it would be a neutral tone. I could never pull off like that really nice looking straight skirt that the Gap used to advertise, but I'd like to think Bella could.
This would seem to support this version of the khaki skirt, although I'm a little hesitant to call it definitive since Meyer seems to be talking a little more generally about the inspiration for Bella's style more than like this one garment, but it definitely supports the connection between Bella's sense of fashion and Meyer's 80s and 90s influenced ultra-conservative style. That's fine, that makes sense, but I am not really interested in that, okay? Dismissing Bella's weird fashion sense as an extension of her as a bland self-insert, right? That's lame, that's tired, okay? And this is literature, and that's a cop-out. I am way more interested in interrogating the in-universe logic of the khaki skirt and the magical effect that it has on one Edward Cullen. Because there is a second insane thing about the khaki skirt scene, and And that is the way that this look with the fully covered knees and the sad beige color scheme makes Edward's little brain short circuit. And that's why it's a meme. Not just because Bella wears it, but because when she does, Edward starts panting like a 107-year-old dog. She pulls out this little Amish number and he goes feral. And an entire generation of readers has clowned on this man for it for almost 20 years, especially in this time of the Twilight Renaissance. We cannot get enough. It is deeply hilarious. And if we think about Edward's character, it makes a gross kind of sense. Especially if we imagine this look in its most boho, flowy Y2K iteration, which could be something that Bella either bought new in 2005-ish or something that she found vintage from the 70s. There's something kind of Edwardian about it. Not Edwardian, but Edwardian, or I guess it is also Edwardian because this is the era of Edward's childhood. It would make sense that Edward's fashion sense would be deeply shaped and influenced by his era of origin at the beginning of the 20th century, and that actually would kind of explain the turtlenecks, that he has a preference for wearing shirts with high necks, and it is borne out throughout the series in his preference for Bella in looks that cover her up. Edward rarely calls Bella sexy, but he does use that word when she wears a full face-covering motorcycle helmet and jacket. He loves how she looks in her wedding dress, which is long and white and lacy and is actually Edwardian. So there's a strong case that this is just true to character. Bella covers her shin bones and she hides the shape of her legs, and that silhouette instantly transports Edward to his first crush in 1910 or whatever. Modest is hottest, I guess, and he's just turned on by her turn-of-the-century decorum and old-fashioned fashion and smooth pigeon torso, I guess. This is a great theory, and it's not canon. I would have happily accepted this reading a few years ago, but since then, we have received new text. There is new canonical Twilight content that directly contradicts this reading of Edward's interest in the khaki skirt. In 2020, yes, the summer of 2020, there has been a new Twilight book since the start of the pandemic. Stephenie Meyer released Midnight Sun. The book was perfectly timed, perhaps a little too perfectly timed, to coincide with the Twilight Renaissance of the past few years. I'd love to sometime take a super deep dive into the Twilight Renaissance, or just into Midnight Sun, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And you may be wondering what I mean by that Midnight Sun is one of my favorite books of all time, and I don't know. Do I mean I earnestly think it ranks among the most high-quality literature that I've ever consumed? No. Is it the opposite, that it's so bad it's good that I enjoy reading it ironically to laugh at how stupid it is? Also, no. No, it is some third thing. It's not a guilty pleasure that I enjoy even though I think it's trashy. I think it deserves my love. I enjoy Midnight Sun in an unreserved, unironic way, some mysterious third way that is unlike the way I enjoy literally any other book. Even the original Twilight Saga, which is compelling in a somewhat inexplicable way, at least then I have my personal history with the series and the cultural moment that it created to somewhat explain why I care about it so much, even though I don't like it in a conventional sense. This book is special. It just is. Midnight Sun is the story of the first Twilight book told from Edward's point of view. That's it. That's literally all it is. It is the same span of time and the same events, but following a different character in his limited first-person point of view. Not only are we freed from Bellavision to get a second opinion on what goes down in the book, but we get to go inside of Edward's brain, which is a spooky Edwardian haunted house of repressed lust and pure rage and increasing confusion. In Twilight, Edward is constructed as a character whose inner life would be unfathomable to us as humans. And Midnight Sun fathoms that unfathomable mind onto the page, and we experience these events through the filter of his super intelligent, mind-reading vampire psyche. But just as importantly, this book means we will get never-before-seen insights onto Edward's true opinions and intentions. The ramifications of this are huge. What did he really think of Bella the first moment he saw her in the cafeteria? What did he experience the first time he smelled her yummy, yummy blood? What went down that evening in Port Angeles before and after he was with Bella? And most importantly, what does he think about the khaki skirt? Why is the long khaki-colored still casual skirt so irresistible to this man? Do you want to know? You want to know the answer? I hope I've hyped it up enough. I hope I have laid the groundwork for anyone uninitiated that this skirt is a beloved meme and is a cornerstone of Edward's characterization. Okay, we appreciate how big this is. In Midnight Sun, the khaki skirt is not mentioned. Swear to God, I would not lie to you about the khaki colored skirt. This is serious. The skirt is not mentioned. As far as Edward's POV is concerned, it does not exist. Just to make sure I didn't miss a mention of it later, I went and text searched skirt in the whole book. And hey, I love a warm paperback as much as the next girl, but sometimes ebooks are better actually. Nothing relevant for skirt, nothing at all comes up for khaki, and nothing relevant for tan, beige, or ugly. But searching blue brings up the numerous time that Edward notices or comments on the blue blouse. When he first sees her wearing it while he watches from the bushes. It's sunny, remember? So he doesn't go to school, but he is obsessed with her by this point. So he hides in the tree line and spies on her during the school day, as you do. And he says, she wore a deep blue blouse today, and the color set off her skin perfectly, making it look like fresh cream. Okay, weird and gross, but this does kind of mirror what Edward says in his dialogue later about the blue blouse, that he's not complimenting the shirt exactly, or even Bella in the shirt, he's complimenting the combination, how the color in the shirt brings out the color in her skin. It's about the interaction, but color theory is not the only interaction Edward is noticing about this shirt on Bella's body. The next morning, this is the morning after the mushroom ravioli and Diet Coke dinner, he picks her up in his Volvo to take her to school. Since she doesn't have her jacket, remember it's in her friend's car, she wears a big bulky sweater, which actually seems to be in line with her normal school outfits. She doesn't like attention, she's kind of uncomfortable with her body, uncomfortable in her own skin, and she is always cold, so Bella wears a lot of thick fabrics and looser fits. And Edward notices. And since he's tilting at his lust like Don Quixote, he finds her style both a blessing and a curse. It masked her slender figure, turning all her delicate curves and soft lines into a shapeless jumble.
I appreciated this almost as much as I wished that she had worn something more like the soft blue blouse she had on last night. The fabric had clung to her skin in such an appealing way, cut low enough to reveal the mesmerizing shape of her collarbones, curling out from the hollow of her throat. The blue had flowed like water along the subtle shape of her body. It was better, essential, that I kept my thoughts far, far away from that shape, so I was grateful for the unbecoming sweater. I couldn't afford to make mistakes.
Now we get to the truth. The color, Edward, the way the blue plays off her pale skin, that was what you noticed. No, we all know what this is about, and what this is about is boobs. He's looking at her cleavage. This is as obvious as it is unacknowledged. Her collarbones, the subtle shape of her body, it clung to her skin, it clung to her bra, is what you mean. You're talking about her boobs. It's okay. She wears big old sweaters most of the time, and you have a big old crush on her, and so the first time you see her cleavage, it takes a second for your brain to reboot with the Dell startup sound. But this is Edward Cullen, and he is not going to honestly face his own desires. Frankly, I'm not sure that he's even aware that that is what he's so drawn to. Maybe he is so repressed that he feels his eyes involuntarily snap to the place where her skin disappears beneath the low neckline of her top, and he honestly thinks, wow, that must be a great color combo. I guess I'm really appreciating Bella dressing for her season. It's also possible that he's unable to see his attraction clearly because it is so clouded by his other attraction to Bella. The open neckline leaves him free to look at her cleavage, and also her throat. He lingers near her collarbones, and everything is described in a liquid sort of way. Her collarbones curl out from the hollow of her throat. The blue flows like water across her body. It's possible you're just thinking of blood there, dude. And neither of these lusts are desires that Edward wants to face head on, so maybe it's just easier to say, I like blue. So on that day of the khaki skirt outfit, when Bella's getting ready to meet the parents, and she comes down the stairs and she said she's decent, we see in Edward's point of view that he takes in her hair, which is pulled back, and her smiling face, and the shirt that shows her cleavage, and he stops there. Why would he look lower? And just like in Twilight, because of course all the dialogue is the same, he tells her that she's actually utterly indecent and more tempting than is fair. Bella is worried that he means in the vampire way, and he rolls his eyes and tries to prove it to her that he obviously means it in the sexy way. But even here, when he kisses her until she passes out to prove how hot he thinks she is, I'm not sure it's that simple. Because before he calls her tempting, we read this. Impulsively, I wrapped my arms around her and held her close. I breathed in her fragrance and smiled. He said she looked tempting. and that this was about him being attracted to her physically, but he sniffed her first. And when that kind of attraction is at play in Edward's brain, what does Bella's outfit really matter? I guess what I'm saying is that Edward Cullen is a blouse man. Maybe Jacob is a khaki skirt guy.